So despite having this YouTube channel for about 3 years, I've actually had a few other channels in the past, ones that I didn't really stick with, they didn't really work out for me. And on top of that, I've also had some jobs where video editing was a important part of the job. So I've been editing videos for about 6 or so years. And in that time, I have been through a lot of different softwares, and I wanted to determine what is the best software for someone to use, as in what's the number one out there. And there's not really one true answer for that question. It really does depend on what you're looking to get out of your software, as well as what limitations you have in terms of hardware and software capabilities. And my editing abilities are very limited by my hardware, my software, and my time. But in that time that I've been video editing, I did find a few different answers for what is the best option. Now, if you're someone who has a PC, you're probably better off using like Adobe Premiere for your editing. If you're someone who has a Mac and you want the best software out there, you're better off using Final Cut Pro, but you also need to be ready to pay that premium price tag. Now, I've been mainly focusing on more of a budget level editing software, and as a Mac user, it kind of narrowed down to two main options. And the result of these options and what you can get out of each one, honestly, it surprised me. So you may be surprised as well. Let's check them out. So if you are a Apple user, you are pretty much going to be familiar with iMovie. And iMovie is not a terrible god awful software. It's just not great. Okay, it is a free software, which is a pretty powerful software to be free, but there is some issues with iMovie that I personally have, and others will probably have the same problem as well. And when it comes to a software that's much better for your editing, whether you want to do something quick and basic or you want something a bit more advanced, but you don't want to pay the huge $300 price tag for Final Cut Pro, then I recommend you go with LumaFusion. Now, I was a bit turned away from LumaFusion for a while because it was originally an iPad only application, and some time ago, really recently, it was then changed into also being a Mac software. Now, if you're someone who just wants the very basic bare minimum, just need to cut out a couple things, add a couple of overlays, then iMovie will be fine. But keep in mind, despite iMovie being a limited software in terms of functions already, if you are using iMovie or plan to use iMovie on a iOS device like an iPad or an iPhone, it's even more limited in what you can do. Whereas LumaFusion was originally an iPad software, and anything you could do on that version you can do on the Mac and vice versa. So you're not having like a much more lower version of the software. Now, one of the things that bothers me with iMovie, or did bother me tremendously, was how it handles your storage. When it comes to making your projects, it'll save them onto your internal hard drive, but it does it in a way where even if you delete the projects after you're done, editing, and you upload it to wherever you want to upload it to, or you save it to another, like an external USB, it'll still save some type of memory of those projects and files, and it will just really build up in your hard drive, causing you to go through a few different options just to remove those files, and it's a pain in the ass to go through. It's something about showing like a hidden folder or something like that. I can't remember what it's called exactly, but it's a pain to go through it. Whereas LumaFusion, once you delete it from the software itself, it'll pretty much clear from your hard drive space, so you don't have to worry about having your hard drive being filled up in the background without you realizing it. Now, one thing that LumaFusion also does much better than iMovie, and it's something I don't use very often, but you may be someone who uses it more than I do, it's how to handle green screen effects. Now, with iMovie, yes, you can use green screen effects, you can put them onto your timeline, but it is very limited because once you put it on your timeline, you can't really move the image or change its size or shape or anything like that on iMovie. Whereas in LumaFusion, you have almost complete freedom to move it around, change the size, It's a much better software for those kind of special effects, whether you want to do something really incredible or just something really basic. Now, you are going to probably have a better software use of the special effects with the Final Cut Pro. You're probably going to have much more options and abilities with the green screen effects and other special effects. But again, this is more for the budget person, not trying to spend an arm and a leg on the software. Now, in terms of the timeline itself, iMovie does have your main media timeline, one overlay timeline. So let's say you want to add a picture on top of your video or another video clip on top, and you can reshape it, resize it within iMovie's abilities. And you have a couple of timelines on the bottom for your audio. Whereas LumaFusion, I believe, allows you to have maybe 6 timelines stacking on top of each other, just to have 6 different video clips and pictures to stack on top of each other. And there's a lot of different things you could do with that, and it's really great that you can use that with LumaFusion. And with audio, same thing, you get more available timelines for audio, not infinite. And I don't know if Final Cut does have an infinite amount or not, but at least with LumaFusion, you have those options to add more clips to your timeline and stack them on top of each other, and that is pretty cool. Now, one thing to keep in mind with LumaFusion, a problem that I had pretty consistently, is certain clips and photos that I would add to my timeline, depending on the project I want to do. It'll sometimes be very washed out. The color will be very washed out and weird, and it took some editing or rather just some searching in the software to really fix that problem. It's just about scaling the color and the vibration, the vibrancy or whatever in that image that you're trying to put on your timeline. It's not something that happens very often. I think it's based on whatever your first clip is on the timeline, but just something to keep in mind while you are, using the software. Now, I say budget software here, and I am going to tell you in terms of what the cost is, because yes, iMovie is free, but LumaFusion is only $30. I was put away from the price because I wanted to find a free software because I was being cheap, but $30 is really not a bad price tag for a video editing software, especially one that you can use on your Mac or your iPad, and it's going to have the same features on both versions of the software. And not only that, but you are getting so much more features and options with the LumaFusion that is really worth the $30 price tag that it cost. Now, aside from that, with iMovie, yes, iMovie does a couple of things a little bit better in my opinion. When it comes to adding clips to your timeline, it is a bit better in the sense that it won't have that weird change in the image's coloring and the whether it's the vibrancy or whatever, it's not going to have that weird change in the quality of the image. But again, it's really a quick fix on LumaFusion, not a big deal. Aside from that, in terms of some transitions from one clip to another and transitioning your audio from one to another, I think iMovie does a transition better when it comes to the images, and LumaFusion does transitions better for the sound. So just something to keep in mind, not a big deal. Again, as I said, it's really just something to get used to, basically. Now, in terms of also actual transitions, whether it's like a slide the screen one direction or do a little animation to have the screen flip a page over or whatever, I think iMovie does have some better transitions, but I think LumaFusion also has some options that iMovie doesn't have. Now, of course, iMovie does also have that option to create your own trailer, whereas LumaFusion, you got to be a bit more creative to do that, and iMovie makes it a bit more easier for you. So all in all, what I'm trying to say here is, if you're gonna use LumaFusion, you can still use iMovie for a couple of things. I still use iMovie every once in a while for something quick or just something simple if I needed to. But when I use my LumaFusion as my default editing software, is not really the idea of I use it just because it's better, even though it is better, it's much better. It's more so of a reflex. Me using LumaFusion by clicking it as my first choice, it's kind of like you breathing. You just do it. You don't think about it, you just do it. And that's how good LumaFusion has been for me, because it allows me to do much more with my editing, a lot more options. But one thing I do gotta admit is with LumaFusion, when you try to rescale your timeline to move your clips around, it could be a little bit of a pain in the ass to do so. And there's a bit of a learning curve, of course. You know, when you have to add files to a new project, or even to start a new project, there's a little learning curve to learn how to do it. But one thing that is cool is you can duplicate an entire project instantly. You can duplicate various clips and audio, and it's much more easier to do as compared to iMovie, since those duplications will just place it on the next spot in the timeline above or below, depending on if it's in video or audio. And you do have some other cool special effects, doing some lightsaber effects, which I originally bought this software just for the lightsaber effects, and it ended up being a much more better software for me with much more options that I was going to use out of it. So $30 is not a bad price for LumaFusion. It is a much better software. There's more options that you can do. It's just a bit of a learning curve. There is a bit you have to learn. There's still stuff I haven't learned yet about LumaFusion, but I'm excited to figure those things out. So that's my video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you had something to think about with this video if you were trying to find a software. Hopefully I gave you some answers, or even some a good recommendation. But if you do have any more questions, let me know in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.